There it is, New York, the Wonder City, a magic city of marvels and superlatives.
1947 was a good time for New Yorkers. With the economy on the rise, the worries of war behind them, and new technologies at their fingertips. This economic boom and demand for luxury and new technologies helped the rise of many large industrial companies, one of which was General Electric. General Electric produced everything from light bulbs to refrigerators.
Well, home, wherever you find it, can be a wonderful place nowadays with the many conveniences of modern living. Your kitchen can be especially wonderful if you get the new General Electric refrigerator home freezer combination. It's everything you ever dreamed about. A big 10 cubic foot refrigerator and a real home freezer that can store up to 70 pounds of frozen foods for as long as a year.
They had plants along the Hudson River at Fort Edward and Hudson Falls. General Electric's close proximity to the river made it the perfect place to dump their production waste, and because of this, the Hudson River has faced a severe pollution threat in the form of PCBs. PCBs, or polychlorinated biphenyls, are a group of man-made chemicals. They are oily liquids or solids, clear to yellow in color, with no taste or smell. PCBs are very stable mixtures that are resistant to extreme temperature and pressure. PCBs were used widely in electrical equipment like capacitors and transformers. They were also used in hydraulic fluids, heat transfer fluids, lubricants, and plasticizers. PCBs have been released into the environment through spills, leaks from electrical and other equipment, and improper disposal and storage. Once in the environment, PCBs can be transported long distances, and they bind strongly to soil and sediment, so they tend to be persistent in the environment. During a 30-year period ending in 1977, when the EPA banned the production of PCBs, it is estimated that approximately 1.3 million pounds of PCBs were discharged into the Hudson River from the two General Electric capacitor manufacturing plants located in Fort Edward and Hudson Falls. Once PCBs entered the river, they were deposited and mixed with the sediments on the river bottom and shoreline. PCBs build up in the environment, increasing in concentration as they move up the food chain. The primary health risk associated with PCBs in the Hudson River is their accumulation in the human body through eating contaminated fish. Since 1976, high levels of PCB in fish have led New York State to close various recreational and commercial fisheries and to issue advisories restricting the consumption of fish caught in the Hudson River. PCBs are considered probable human carcinogens and are linked to health effects such as low birth rate, thyroid disease, and learning, memory, and immune system disorders. PCBs in the river sediment also negatively affect fish and wildlife.
Unlike any other substance, PCBs are the living proof of the fact that once chemicals are released into the environment, they remain there for generations. When PCBs were first introduced in the 1920s, they were considered invaluable in electrical equipment, in buildings and in machinery. The chemicals are practically invisible and are not something ordinary people come in contact with. But a mere few generations later, PCBs had imperceptibly spread all over the world and are now to be found in both animal and human organisms, as well as in foodstuffs. When in the 1970s it first became evident that PCBs were a health hazard, they were banned by most of the developed countries, but it was too late, for PCBs don't simply disappear. On the contrary, they continue to do harm to this very day.
In 1984, 200 miles of the river between Hudson Falls and the Battery were placed on the EPA's national priority list of the country's most contaminated hazardous waste sites. Today, the Hudson River exists as one of the most extensively studied rivers in the country, having been monitored almost continuously for a period of more than 25 years. Ongoing evaluations of water quality, sediment, air quality, fish, and wildlife by the federal government and the state of New York demonstrated that the river was not cleaning itself, and PCBs in the sediment poses serious risks to human health and the environment. Studies conducted to evaluate the extent of the problem revealed that most of the contaminated sediments were in hot spots situated in a 40-mile stretch of the river between the towns of Fort Edward and Troy. Thankfully, GE and the EPA have teamed up to clean up the river. In February of 2002, the EPA issued a record of decision for the Hudson River PCB Superfund site that called for targeted environmental dredging of approximately 2.65 million cubic yards of PCB contaminated sediment from a 40-mile section of the upper Hudson River from Fort Edward to Troy. Dredge areas were identified using the results of a multi-year sediment sampling program conducted by GE. The site is divided into the upper Hudson River and the lower Hudson River. Within the river sections, dredging was conducted in areas of approximately 5 acres. The dredging of river bottom sediment began in 2009 and was completed in 2015. The dredging occurred in 2 phases. The first phase of dredging occurred in between May and November of 2009. During phase 1, approximately 283,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediment was removed from a 6-mile stretch of the upper Hudson River near the town of Fort Edward. After an extensive evaluation by an independent panel of scientists and input from a broad range of stakeholders in 2010, the EPA developed plans for a second part of the cleanup. Phase 2 began in June 2012 and was conducted at full production level to remove the remainder of the contaminated river sediment targeted for dredging. During Phase 2, approximately 2.5 million cubic yards were dredged. In all, over 6 seasons of dredging, approximately 2.75 million cubic yards of PCB contaminated sediment was removed from the river bottom. Some areas were repopulated with aquatic plants in the growing seasons following the year in which the area was dredged. Habitat reconstruction followed the dredging and continued into 2016. Both phases of cleanup were conducted by GE under the terms of a 2006 legal agreement. In 2010, GE agreed to conduct and pay for the second phase of the cleanup. All of the dredging and related work was conducted by GE with EPA oversight. The future plans for the project will begin once facility demobilization and restoration has been completed and the required project reports have been prepared and approved by the EPA. Then the dredging portion of the cleanup will be considered complete and the operations, maintenance, and monitorization phase of the project will begin. During this phase, monitoring is conducted to track the recovery of the river over time. The EPA will conduct 5-year reviews of the project. The testing will include water column monitoring, sediment monitoring, habitat monitoring, fish monitoring, and cap monitoring.